Hey all, this is Take Flight here with episode 1 of my new mini conversation slash podcast slash discussion called Dallas Wings Live. I am your host at Take Flight and I'm super excited to be here. As many of you that follow Take Flight know, I've been working over the last 2 years to find a really good way to be able to discuss and talk about Dallas Wings basketball. And I think that I originally had a great format that was working, but unfortunately the platform that I was using got shut down through Spotify. So I've been researching multiple different platforms, and this kind of I think YouTube is definitely going to be the best option going forward. It's easy to mass produce it and kind of send it out to everybody that way. So yeah, this is Dallas Wings Live. And there's all sorts of things that I do want to focus on with this series. I want to keep episodes between 15 to 20 minutes usually. Obviously, once the season starts and we have game recaps, they might go upwards of 30 minutes, but I usually want to keep them around that 15 to 20 minute length just to keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Obviously, we're in the middle of CBA negotiations between the WNBA Players Association and the players themselves, and then they're negotiating with the WNBA. And it's been kind of a rocky last, I would say, 6 months since about October. We've seen periods of real conversation, and we've seen periods of the WNBA just really not making any sort of concessions, particularly on the financial side of things. The WNBA has shown that they're willing to move on the numbers when it comes to housing, when it comes to adding developmental contracts, when it comes to things like facility improvements for specific teams and requiring teams to have those particular facility improvements. But we haven't really seen the Wings, or not the Wings, the WNBA move on finances in regards to salaries beyond where they're currently at now. In the latest proposal, I believe the minimum salary has increased pretty significantly, as well as the new max contracts being over $1 million. But where players are really concerned and fighting back is revenue sharing and the percentage that the WNBA is offering. And there's a real distinct discretion here when we're talking about gross revenue versus total revenue. Total revenue would be the revenue that the league gets before they pay their bills. And the WNBA players are currently asking for, I believe in the latest proposal, 25% of total revenue. The WNBA has come back at them and they've basically said we're not interested in a total revenue sharing agreement. We want a gross revenue, which means after we pay our bills, we will then pay out. And I think they're offering in the latest proposal 15% of that revenue to the players. So the players are asking for a completely different model than the WNBA is even proposing, which to me signals that these two sides are still really, really far apart. And we're currently in the last week of February, which means that we're entering into March Madness season here in a few weeks. And that just puts us on a trajectory for, unfortunately, the season more than likely being delayed if nothing can get solved. I would say probably by the end of this week. I've always said that if nothing can be solved by the first week of March, that we will probably see a delay in the WNBA season. And I think that's currently where we sit at now with the talks between the two parties being pretty stagnated, I would say recently. I would say the good news is things are definitely trending in a more positive direction in regards to the WNBA has been willing to at least send back proposals. If you remember back in December, the WNBA basically ignored the players for 30 days. And I hate to be this person, but that's kind of what put us in this horrible situation where we're at now. The WNBA hasn't really been super open about being quick with their negotiations until I would say the last couple of weeks. And players authorized a strike vote about a month ago, basically saying if the WNBA continues to negotiate in bad faith, that the players would be willing to strike and go into a worker stoppage. And I've been very adamant in my in my opinion, saying that a strike, while it can be effective, it would be really, really bad for the league and for the optics of the league. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think a work stoppage at this point is going to move the WNBA any closer to the number that the players want. And that to me is concerning because I think the players are asking for a fair number. I do think the players, every single proposal, have been trying to get closer and closer to the middle, but the league isn't moving at all. And it's really hard to negotiate from that perspective because as somebody that's been on negotiating teams for CBAs, not obviously basketball related, but in my job and in my career, I can say that you want to come into a negotiation, obviously with like your demands, which I think the players have said was housing, facility requirements. They had a huge list: core designation, rookie contracts, and then obviously revenue sharing. And I think the players have kind of given up on a lot of them, and they've basically said we want facility requirements, we want housing, and then we want this revenue sharing. And those are the three things basically they're demanding. And the WNBA has moved on the housing and they've moved on the facility requirements, but they have not moved really at all on the number in regards to revenue sharing, which is definitely not helpful. And it's going to cause both sides to continue to obviously be far apart on in this conversation. And as a fan of the league, I obviously want the season to happen, but I obviously know that these players have been underpaid for a long time. And I think since 2020, and it's hard to know for sure because obviously the WNBA doesn't make their finances publicly available. And there's a lot of reasons why. Obviously, 40% of the league is owned by the NBA. The WNBA doesn't even own a majority of itself, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. But since 2020, the WNBA has been consistently growing, and we've seen profit in a lot of markets. Obviously, New York, Indiana. You look at Golden State last season, they're consistently bringing in big crowds. Las Vegas, obviously, Minnesota always brings in really good crowds. So we're seeing markets in the WNBA really grow. We're seeing expansion teams, and obviously with Golden State and then Toronto and Portland, and then we have Cleveland and Philadelphia and Detroit coming soon. We're seeing that the WNBA is growing, and more teams means more money and more revenue. And I think that's one of the concerns that the players have is that when the WNBA keeps shooting back saying, well, if we agreed to your proposal, we would lose hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not incorporating the expansion fees. And the only reason the WNBA is able to expand is because of these players. It's because of the product that they're putting on the floor that is becoming more popular. So yeah, from my perspective, I've been very vocal. I do think that the WNBA players are going to have to move down on their number. I know that's not something that fans like to hear, but I do think that they're going to probably have to move down closer to 18 to 20% in order to get a deal done. The WNBA, though, has to be willing to move up because the players, I think, started at around 40%, and they've already moved down almost half of that number, and the WNBA hasn't moved at all. But I think in order for the players to play this season, they're going to have to move a little bit closer to that 18 to 20% number. And I think if the players basically, I think if the Players Association sent back an offer saying like, we'll take like 18 to 20%, let's say this first year we start at 18 and we grow over time to 20%, maybe to ease the worry of the owners who are saying that they're not 100% sure like this is a sustainable long-term deal. I think that would be a good start. And then obviously in 6 years we could negotiate a higher amount. But yeah, it's definitely concerning that the WNBA is continuing to send back proposal after proposal that is not moving at all in terms of revenue sharing. I recently found out that WNBA players don't even get paid for jersey sales, which I think is extremely concerning. You look at like a Paige Beckers last year, who's one of the most popular rookies in WNBA history, and the amount of jerseys that I still see. I watch Unrivaled and I watch Athletes Unlimited, and I went to WNBA games, and her jersey was always one of the jerseys that I see the most, really wherever I go. I teach, and I have students coming up to me talking about Paige all the time and the impact that Paige is making on the game. And for her to not get paid for the jerseys that she's selling is a concern, and it's really wrong, to be honest with you. So there are a lot of things wrong with the WNBA that I think need to get fixed, and I'm hopeful that we'll have a season. Obviously, I want to watch Dallas Wings basketball, but the reality is where things are at right now, we're looking at least a shortened season or a delayed start, and it's unfortunate that it had to come to this point, but the reality is I think it was kind of unavoidable from the players' perspective because the league hasn't really made any effort to speed this process up or really negotiate in good faith at all. And that's very frustrating as a fan. And like I said on social media multiple times, while I stand with the players, and I've always stood with the players, I called on, like 2.5 months ago, I called on a blackout of the WNBA in regards to buying merchandise and buying anything related to the WNBA, including like pre-ordering tickets and canceling your league pass and any sort of merchandise that you could buy through the WNBA itself and shifting it through to the players' stores. I'm always going to be players first, but this would be horrible for the momentum of the league to have a work stoppage right now, and they do have to find a way to figure this out. And that brings me to kind of where I wanted to shift the remainder of my conversation. There's a couple things I want to talk about, but first I do want to hit on what happens if the WNBA does not have a season. For a majority of players, particularly those that are participating in Unrivaled, I don't think we will see any issues. Unrivaled pays their players extremely well. Obviously, Unrivaled does only have a limited amount of roster spots. I think they're in the 40s, and we're talking about a league in the WNBA that's almost at 200 roster spots. So there's a big chunk of players that wouldn't have an income, particularly through the WNBA, and would lose out on that contract. And we've seen anonymous player interviews come out where players are saying, like, me losing my WNBA pay would be really hard, and I would have to obviously go and find work elsewhere. And I've seen a lot of people on social media say, well, Unrivaled can just expand. And while I think Unrivaled can expand, considering their first 2 years they have made money, you also have to look at Unrivaled, particularly where it's at now versus where it was at last year. Unrivaled made a lot of money last year, and it drew in a lot of people that were interested in it. Unrivaled this year in terms of viewership, has decreased a lot. And viewership doesn't equate to ticket sales. I know that they sold out arenas in Philadelphia. I know that they're on their way to selling out a one night in Brooklyn. But when we're talking about expanding, you have to have money to do that. And unless the investors in Unrivaled basically pocket up and say, hey, we're willing to inject more money into your organization so you can expand, then that's not an option. Unrivaled does not have the money to just expand to cover all of these roster spots that are being left out. And if they did, I think that Unrivaled would be a lot bigger in regards to roster spots than it is right now. And then the other option I've seen floated around is Athletes Unlimited. And I hate to break it to you, but Athletes Unlimited salaries are roughly $20,000 to $40,000. That's not going to cut it. That's not even a minimum salary in the WNBA right now with the old collective bargaining agreement. So, I mean, that might help in the short term, but if you don't have an entire season, that's going to be a big loss for those players. And if you take away the 40 Unrivaled players, that leaves about 160 players that don't have another option other than looking at possibly playing overseas, or maybe getting on a coaching staff overseas, or doing something that would supplement that income. And a lot of leagues are wrapping up play right as the WNBA season starts. So like Brianna Stewart's doing, she's joining Fenerbahce for the last couple of weeks of the season, but then they're done. The season's over because the WNBA would have started. And a lot of leagues overseas structure their schedule around the WNBA and other professional leagues. So it would be difficult for all of these players to pick up their lives and go. And then on top of that, you have to have money. Unless those clubs are going to pay for your housing and your travel costs, you have to have money to be able to move. And then you have to, like, let's say a deal happens, you have to be ready to leave those teams and come back. And, like, I don't know contractually how that would work if you signed a if you signed a contract with another team, there would have to be a stipulation saying that this is only temporary until the WNBA comes back, and it just turns into a huge mess. So I don't think there's a perfect answer right now. And for those 160 players that unfortunately don't have unrivaled contracts, I really am. I mean, those are the players I'm thinking about the most. Those are the ones without the NIL money from college, or the endorsement deals, or the shoe money, or the supplemental income that they get from advertisements and stuff. And that's the thing that I think is the scariest about this. So I'm hopeful that this will get figured out before we even have to get to that conversation. So yeah, that kind of wraps up my thoughts on the current CBA. I did want to end today talking briefly about ESPN. ESPN announced in replacement of Sunday Night Baseball, which I believe they just recently lost the rights to, that they are going to be starting a women's sports show every Sunday in their primetime spot. And this is so awesome. Seeing a women's sports show go into a primetime slot. I think this once again proves my point that the WNBA momentum right now is higher than it's ever been before. And imagine not having a season. And all of these things are in place right now for the WNBA to possibly grow even more over the upcoming year. I think it would be detrimental to the league. And I think players know that. And they've said, like, we have so much momentum. I know Brianna Stewart recently talked about it on a podcast saying, like, we have so much momentum right now and we understand that there needs to be urgency in getting this done. And I really hope that they believe in that and that's what they're pursuing, because I think when you look at the WNBA right now, you see a lot of eyes on it, and it isn't just one player. You've got all sorts of players that are really bringing in viewership, and people want to watch these games, and these games are competitive and exciting and fun to watch, and we all want the players to get paid. We all want them to get paid what they deserve. And we're going to keep fighting for that, but we also have to see the other side of it in regards to there needs to be a season somehow, even if they sign like some sort of like temporary extension that, I don't know, meets the league where it's at now. And then they read, like maybe they decide to only sign like a 2-year CBA, and then they meet in 2 years and they discuss and they see where things are at. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think there is a good answer, but I will say I've watched the NHL, the MLB, the NBA all go through this, and it's normal for leagues to go through this. It's just players are fighting for what they deserve, and unfortunately the time's running out. If we want to have an expansion draft and a draft and a free agency, deal's going to have to get done probably within the next week or two, or else we're probably on a path to a delayed or even canceled WNBA season. So not really the update I wanted to give everybody, but it is important to be honest and truthful. But yeah, that wraps up episode 1 of Dallas Wings Live. I'm so excited to be bringing this new conversation. Hopefully in the future, I'll even be able to bring people on to discuss and talk directly with them about the Dallas Wings and the makeup of our roster and our new coaching staff and the move to downtown. But there's so much that has to be done before we get to that point. So as always, please like, subscribe, even leave a comment on this video. It's more than appreciated. The more WNBA news that we can get out from independent people like me, I think does the league so much better. So as always, go Wings. I will see you guys next time.